So I'm speaking with composer Henry Jackman. Henry is, of course, known for, such amazing body of work from X-Men First Class to Kingsman. This year he did Kong, Skull Island, Kingsman, The Golden Circle, and he has Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, opening this weekend. Henry, thank you so much for chatting again.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So, we've done plenty of interviews in the past, and we did a great video interview that we sat down and kind of discussed everything. So this will be just kind of a nice chat about Jumanji. So what I think originally James Newton Howard was set to score this film, and he had to take off of it because of his scheduling. So when did you come on to the project, and how did you kind of get involved?
That's a good question. It's a while now, so I'm almost struggling to remember. I think... once you get involved and you get writing, it sort of almost feels like ancient history how you even came into it. I can't, to be honest with you, I cannot exactly remember, other than talking to Jake, the director,
right?
Who's very collaborative, very creative, and he has a great family history. If you know about what his father got up to, and still does.
Yeah, the castings.
Exactly. It's a sort of aristocratic Hollywood lineage there.
Right.
So I was very excited. And I can't remember when, let's see, it might have been this time last year, I read the script, which I thought was really well written. The funny thing about Jumanji is, given that it's a long time after such a sort of childhood favorite nostalgic film, which of course featured the now late, great Robin Williams.
Right.
There's I don't know what to call it, exactly how to describe it, but, a sort of reticence and a nervousness when it was like, oh, well, they're making another Jumanji film. There's a sort of certain amount of eyeball rolling. I'm like, oh, dear, really, are they? Why don't they leave my childhood, memories of such a wonderful, emotional film alone? And, So I probably shared some of those feelings when I got the script. But when I read the script, it may be heresy to say it, I actually thought the narrative and the structure of the story was better than the first one. Now, that may be because I'm not as emotionally attached to the first one. It wasn't one of those films that, like for me, I guess it would have been Indiana Jones.
Right, yeah.
But I read the script, and it immediately became clear to me, if Jake was as good at directing as writing, then we were in for a good ride, because it's a very well-structured story that has, he's known for comedy, but it had a lot of adventure, had a lot of comedy, actually had a surprising emotional weight to it that you sort of associate with, Disney animation films always hit you somewhere along the line with an unexpected
right.
Emotional punch. But I just remember thinking, wow, this guy can really write. I don't know why I should sound surprised about that. And it turns out he really knows how to direct as well. And the great thing for me is, I don't know, I feel like I'm slightly schizophrenic musically, because I've just had such an eclectic background that I'm just as happy making crazy industrial noises on, something like Captain America 2, like Winter Soldier or something like that. But I also have profound, excitement about scores whose lineage is more related to, I don't know, James Horner, Alan Silvestri, John Williams. It's a different. It's sort of before we all got minimalist and electronic.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
There's a completely different heritage of film music. Which I love. I absolutely love it. And there aren't that many action adventure films where a director is in a position, of his own accord, and because it suits the filmmaking, to celebrate a thematic symphonic score that isn't, minimalist or covered in ostinatos or having all sorts of electronic and ambient texture. I'm not knocking any of those things. I also do those things, but, the grass is always greener on the other side. I was like, oh, fantastic. This will be, if I'm lucky and Jake is amenable to this proposition, then as far as I can make out, this really ought to be, the score for this ought to be in that lineage and be a celebration of symphonic and, sort of virtuoso orchestrated thematic music. And it's not like Hollywood's full of those kind of opportunities in 2017, so I just jumped at it.
Absolutely. And I was one of those people, when I saw the trailer, kind of my eyebrow raised, like, what? And then the reviews were coming in, and congratulations, it's being so well received. And then I listened to the score, and I was so excited to hear what you were able to do. I know your love for Alan Silvestri, and I could feel you kind of pulling him into the score a little bit. And Talk about the approach and dealing with the story. I mean, because you mentioned as action, adventure, heart, and comedy. And how did you kind of find the right tone for this film?
Well, the first mission really, it's quite well represented in the first track on the CD. I think it's called Jumanji Overture.
Yes, yeah.
And in order to sort of really put my flag in the turf, as it were, I thought the best thing to do, because, well, you know what it's like. I mean, you're so knowledgeable about film music. There can be a tendency to be scared of theme.
Yeah.
In modern film music, and I completely understand that. If you're doing a movie like Sicario, nothing could be less appropriate than some giant bells and whistles symphonic score covered in stirring themes. That would be preposterous for a movie like Sicario. And Sicario has an amazing score that's, much more textual. It's fantastic. But with a movie like this, it would be a crying shame not to go the whole way thematically, as it were. So I thought my sneaky sort of first mission would be to sort of write an overture, banging in as many themes as I could in 3 minutes and 30 seconds or whatever it was, to sort of almost to present to Jake the menu.
Yeah.
The menu for the film. And I'd soon find out if he listened to it and went, well, I think that's, a bit much, the sort of theme flying all over the place. Then I knew I was in trouble. And if he listened to it and went, oh, fantastic, this is what we need, then I knew I'd be in good shape. And I've already sort of, it was my way of selling the theme. So I spent a lot of time away from the computer and orchestration and the rest of it, with my iPhone, piano, manuscript, paper and pencil, and just working away on themes, to be honest, in hopes that they could all get used, and it's the sort of movie that would not keep pulling its punches and try and hide themes all the time. So I probably spent a good 6-7 weeks refining, getting these themes out the door, which is probably best represented in, like I say, in that first track, the Jumanji Overture. And to my great relief, when I played it to Jake, I mean, he was jumping up and down. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised with his heritage and his angle on filmmaking, but you don't know, because he'd never done a big Hollywood blockbuster or action film. Funnily enough, he'd been known for comedy.
Right.
So one of my fears is that, well, maybe he's going to push the comedy angle, but I couldn't have been more wrong. He was an extremely not musically knowledgeable and very classy individual who, throughout the collaboration of the score, in fact became so sort of musically conversant, we were able to have quite specific conversations about orchestration and melody and harmony and all that. It's fantastic. So yeah, it was sort of a guilty. If you've got a musical background where you have studied your Debussy and Ravel and Stravinsky and all the rest of it, of course you're never going to write music as good as the giants of 20th century concert music. But if you've got some of those paints in the cupboard, it's a real shame if you don't get to use them. And it always amuses me, because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like because I've got all this different eclectic background, it's just two sides of a same coin to me. I mean, I was extremely excited to, like I say, I always use the Winter Soldier as a good example, because it's so industrial and barbaric, and I really enjoy that. And then I really enjoy, this sort of symphonic, thematic approach. But I guess you can never quite win, because people who really like things like Winter Soldier, who go, oh, this is dope, go, what the hell is all this frilly, meaningless orchestral music? And then people who really like orchestral music, like, oh, well, that's better, Jackman's pulled his finger out and can actually write, half a decent tune, and then, if they hear things like Winter Soldier, they go, what the hell is that? That's just noise.
No, I remember we talked about that, how it did kind of garner...
No, you can't win, but, you've just got to, if you are lucky enough to have been sort of musically educated in all these sort of different aspects of music, then you just enjoy them when they're appropriate, when different styles are called for. So the main thing with this movie is, if you saw the movie without music, it's blindingly obvious that this is not the time to bust out all your electronic chops. It's time for a good rambunctious, adventurous, celebratory symphonic score.
Yeah, I really loved it. I wrote my review on it, and it was so enjoyable. Like I just had so much fun with it. And but did you have to kind of embrace electronics a little bit for kind of the video game aspect of kind of they changed the whole thing?
Not really, no. No, I mean, to be honest with you, I think every single instrument in that score is acoustic. There is a video game. It's funny, unlike Wreck-It Ralph, where the video game element actually is so embedded and sort of implied throughout the film. It had, a musical knock-on effect with little 8-bit sort of pieces that sounded like a sort of Namco
Right, yeah.
Arcade game. And then there was a lot of synths and whatnot, because the actual world into which Wreck-It Ralph and Vanellope get sucked has so many visual references. Whereas Jumanji, even though, without giving the story away to your listeners, has a video game element to it because they are sucked into this Jumanji world, once they arrive in the Jumanji world, it feels more like a sort of classic Indiana Jones world, even though the story structurally has this video game aspect to it. So that being the case, unlike Wreck-It Ralph, there really is, almost no electronics at all. The only kind of non-orchestral element, for want of a better way of putting it, is there's a piece called Brantford High and a piece at the end, which is when they're teenagers before they've been transformed and pulled into. And so that's more like, sort of high school flavor. So there's acoustic guitars and drums and a few electric guitars knocking around the place to more represent, Brantford High School.
90210.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Since the film does have three really big comedic leads. I mean, you have Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart and Jack Black. As a composer, when you're dealing with kind of pretty bold performances that kind of rely on, there is physical comedy and there is kind of dialogue, situational comedy. Did you have to kind of navigate around that with the music?
Yes, and that's very well put, because navigate around is exactly what you need to do. The fact that there was a strong, because Jake, he's a great comedy writer, and he wrote, co-wrote this story. The challenge with there being a strong comedic element to a film, in regards to music, is always that you have to stop for the jokes, to put it as crudely as possible. It is that, but the trick is that you don't want a hat on a hat. So if there's comedy and it's working, your best bet as a composer, as you carefully put it, is to navigate your way around. You should think of it like in skiing when they have that slalom where the flags are in the ground, you have to weave around. Yeah. If you think of the jokes as the flags, you don't want to be leave them alone and weave around them. And sometimes it means these little structurally interesting things in the cue where you just have a couple of 2 or 3 beats rest and then pick up as you left off. You need gaps, but they shouldn't be so long that you think the piece has ended. You end up learning a little bag of tricks to do with a sort of continuity in music that needs pauses, but in such a way that you know that the piece is continuing. If that makes any sense. But your best bet is never get in the way of a punchline.
Yeah, because comedy is so it's so reliant on timing and the edit and kind of to make sure those lands. And I can't imagine how hard it is to make sure that your music timing is kind of dancing around that timing.
Yes, and it's an interesting point, because unlike the grand sort of sweep of things we were talking about earlier, where it's a pencil, manuscript paper, piano, iPhone, thinking about these, once you get into this sort of detail you're talking about, now we're more in this kind of Swiss watch area where it really is those little slopes in the BPM to sort of crescendo, get a crescendo going and stop at the exact moment in time for the delivery of a punchline. That's all much more kind of, micro management of a piece to really lock into the comedy.
Absolutely. Overall, the film, congratulations, because it might be one of my favorite scores of yours. It's just so fun. I just loved it so much, and the themes and everything. Earlier this year, you did want to touch a little bit. You got to return to the world of Matthew Vaughn with Kingsman, The Golden Circle, and you got to kind of work with your friend Matt Margeson again, who's amazing. So how did how was that kind of rejoining that world, and how does Matt kind of complement your style, and what does he bring to the table in a co-composing role?
Oh, well, Matt's fantastic. He's super creative. He's great with theme. He's great with orchestration. He's also working with Matthew Vaughn can sometimes be a challenge.
That's what I've heard.
I love the guy, but that's about the most delicate way I could put it, and for the best reasons. The guy's seriously passionate about his filmmaking. One, and two. he's, by his own admission, a sort of closet music producer. So, every now and then we'll sort of really zone in on a few things. For example, the Poppy theme in Kingsman 2, and drive us all crazy. But for good reasons, just pushing and pushing and pushing. What if we did this? What if we did that? But what if we did, what about this? And let me go back to like such and such a version, and going, I wouldn't say round in circles, because we always end up in a really good place, but he's incredibly demanding, but in a way that ultimately produces a fantastic result, and in a way that's impossible to criticize, because he has the passion. I mean, a lot of everyone remembers the sort of passion you have for music as a teenager, where it's such a passion for music that it's almost defining. I mean, people use music to define who they are, and especially, it's a sort of known, I don't know what you call it, sociological phenomenon that music is so important in teenagers. It's used to sort of form part of your identity, what kind of music you listen to. And unless you do music professionally, it's sort of inevitable that level of intensity over years, tails off. And that's just not true of Matthew. He's got that sort of passion. So it's great, and so have I, and definitely so has Matthew Margeson. So we had so many creative conversations where we were sort of scratching our head, thinking, are we ever going to get the final version of this Poppy theme, where we've definitely got the theme and the what it's supposed to sound like, the color, the arrangement, all the rest of it. But we got there in the end, and he's got a very definite. I would say that another aspect that we appreciate, both me and Matt Margeson, is it's sometimes the case that a director is so busy and has so many other things to think about that if there's a musical challenge at hand, it can sort of feel like you're on your own while the director's just sort of giving half-assed notes, and you're trying to decipher what the hell to do. And the fantastic thing about Matthew Vaughn is he's in the trench with you. He's covered in mud, just like you are, as part of the musical team. And however tricky it can be to find a certain, creative aspect to a film, it doesn't half help when you feel like your director's, charging into battle just like you are, with the same sword and armor covered in crap. So I really appreciate that
it was
aspect
such
of
a fun
filmmaking. But no, look. Well, I was just going to say it was sort of it's always tempting to think, sequels are easy, you've already got the themes, right? It's like, well, apart from anything else, there was this New Statesman theme, and it's always deceptive to think you're retreading territory, because you never quite are. It's always different second time around. Something me and Matthew Margeson discussed a lot. We had the Kingsman theme.
Right, yeah.
And the Statesman theme, but it's never quite the same animal,
And the introduction of the John Denver song was such a unique, kind of gave it a unique texture and color to the whole score. I mean, it became Merlin's theme,
Exactly. And, well, that's another thing that me and Matthew Margeson often discuss, that we also appreciate about Matthew Vaughn, is he's bold. One of the great pieces of advice I got from, it's actually just a little kind of in passing remark he once made. We weren't even working together at the time. He was stuck on some bit of writing or whatever the challenge was. I can't remember what it was. But I remember him saying, look, well, the bottom line is, if you hit a crossroads and you're not quite sure what to do, out of all available options, you should just always go for the boldest, because then at least if you're completely wrong, at least you go down in flames. And and you can tell that's part of his personality, because there'll be musical choices with needle drops or just maneuvers, like why don't we have the John Denver song for Merlin? They're pretty bold, but they end up having significant impact. And as long if you have good judgment, with which Matthew Vaughn does, then these things, it's worth being bold.
Yeah, for sure. And he's one of the boldest, most stylistic, I think, auteur directors working today. I mean, his style is unmatched.
Definitely. There's whatever you want to say about Matthew Vaughn, you could not accuse his films of not having an artistic opinion.
Yes.
I mean, that's just how he's built as a person,
Absolutely. So, we're kind of closing out the year here, and to kind of wrap things up at the interview, I was wondering if you have any New Year's resolutions for yourself, personally, professionally. Do you have any goals for 2018?
well, you got me there, because the thing about writing film scores, especially if you do loads of them like I do, there's usually not enough gap between projects to be sufficiently reflective to come up with anything useful. I should probably give up smoking. If I had even half of the intelligence I think I have, I should probably stop smoking, which is a very pedestrian thing to be talking about. Well, I feel like I've got some great projects coming up in 2018. So, as my father always used to make me say before I headed off to school, Jackmans must do their best at all times. So there's to be no creative flagging of any kind, and I've just got to launch into these great new projects for next year with undiminished enthusiasm, which I'm lucky enough to. It doesn't even feel like that will be difficult, because it's it's just about the best job I could possibly think of. And if I didn't do it, I don't know what I'd do. I'd be putting price labels on foodstuffs and I'd be useless at anything else.
I mean, you have a great slate coming up. I mean, you have Wreck-It Ralph 2, which is coming. Get to rejoin that world. And is it? I saw on IMDb. I don't know if this is true. They're making a Just Cause movie. Is that true?
Yes, I'm not exactly sure as to the full, structure and logistics of that. That's definitely. Yeah, let's say that's a suspended but highly likely possibility.
That would be interesting, because the game, I love the game, and I love your score for the game. It was great.
It's very cool.
But Henry, I just wanted to thank you again for your time and for catching up, and many best wishes for happy holidays and a great new year, and I'm sure we'll be talking again next year.
Indeed. Well, same to you. Happy holidays.